Sarah, first, I just want to say thank you for being a part of this collective. One of the reasons why I reached out to you was because I think your content is so potent, and I feel like the nervous system and all the stuff that you talk about, you kind of bring it back to that. And I feel like it's it's stuff that we should have learned in high school. I also love that at the end of your videos, you're not just giving information, but you're also giving a lot of how-tos, right? So what do we do with this? So yeah, I love your content, and I thought it would be a gift to share it in audio format via podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I love collaborating with folks, and it's just such an honor to be a part of the collective and to be serving this community and each person that's listening now. So thank you so much for having me. And I really join you in feeling deeply that this work really, I believe, should be in every elementary school. It should be in every place of government.
Oh, you think further back. You think elementary.
I
was thinking high school.
Starting this very, very young. It's so interesting to me that we learn how to make dioramas, and we learn about cumulus clouds, and we learn trigonometry and geometry. And not that those things are not important, but nobody teaches us about the vehicle we inhabit and how to actually be in the driver's seat of it. And so as a result, everybody's just kind of doing their best. We're at the mercy of external circumstances, patterns we don't really understand. And what occurs is this brilliant that, we can chat about a bit maybe today, or certainly I'll have episodes on it, but this brilliant autonomic nervous system, which I call our protective nervous system. If we aren't in the driver's seat, it's sort of like, so if we are a vehicle, there's a driver's seat of the vehicle. When our system thinks we aren't safe, it kind of like it shoots us into the back seat, and then it goes on autopilot and it takes over.
Yes.
And so choices that we make in life, the behaviors we have, but really our truly our entire experience is going to be indicative of what's happening in our nervous system. So yeah, I join in that. I wish I had it as a kid myself.
I agree. Me too. And I got to say, because no child enters adulthood unscarred, because there is trauma, and we fall into fight or flight states. We are in unsafe environments as we grow up, because that's just part of life. This is foundational. This language and what you're talking about it's not like for a select few, it's for the masses. So let's put a bookmark there, and tell me about your childhood and how you grew up. And I want to eventually get to what led you to gravitate toward this. I'm assuming that somewhere in there, Peter Levine in that book, The Body Keeps a Score, has and made some kind of impact on you. But yeah, let's start from early on, and you could go back as far as you want.
So, like so many people, oftentimes our purpose, wherever our purposes lies, our biggest work in our lives. And so for me, I grew up with a quite extreme complex trauma history. I was sexually abused inside my home, raped for 10 years or so.
This is early childhood?
Yeah. This was beginning in elementary school. And severe neglect, and there was 8 kids, but really everyone was raising themselves. Poverty and
wow, 8 kids. You're one of 8?
I'm one of 8.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
So, it was. My mother had 8 children, multiple different men, but we all grew up in the same house together. Extraordinary experiences of pretty extreme trauma, or very extreme trauma. And so as a result of that, I couldn't learn, fully. Meaning, and what I mean by that is when we experience trauma of any kind, but certainly the kind of trauma I just described, our thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex, where we can read something and comprehend it, where we can intake information, it shuts off. which is a brilliant survival response. So kids aren't able to learn if they are experiencing continual forms of trauma.
Oh,
My
interesting.
system.
Right.
Yeah. And so this perpetuates a problem, right? Because kids in school then get the message that they're not good, there's something wrong with them, they're not smart, when in fact what's really transpiring oftentimes is their system is dysregulated. It's not possible for them to learn fully.
Wait, so is the learning part of the brain shut off so everything could, all the energy can go into the protection of self and fight or flight, right? The focus changes.
That's right. This is when I was a child and into being a young adult, and all along the way, no one was telling me what was happening inside of my system.
Right.
One of the biggest things about trauma is it's not just the actual event, it's the aftermath of the event and what transpires.
The ripple.
Yeah. And so the beautiful thing about how our systems work, again, I didn't understand. I just thought I was broken. There was something wrong with me. It could never change. But what's occurring when we experience trauma is that we have this threat detector, and its whole job, I'll just briefly mention this, is to keep us safe and alive. It's looking out every millisecond. So it's like, that's pretty fast to say, is that safe, dangerous, or life-threatening? Those are the three choices it's saying. It's looking outside. Interoceptively, it's also looking inside. So if something is dangerous, then we go into our sympathetic nervous system. People have heard that referred to as fight or flight.
Right.
And when we're there, we think about, if a lion is chasing me, I don't need to learn a new language or philosophize. I need to be able to get away. So our system says we don't need this thinking brain. It takes a lot of energy and blood flow for our brain to function. Shut that down. We shut down our immune system, our GI tract, and so on and so forth. Now, if the lion is about to eat us, meaning the impala is about to get eaten by the lion, I think this is so beautiful. We all have something called a dorsal vagal complex, and this is our state of shutdown. And our system goes here when we say, it's essentially saying, my darling, we can't get away from this thing and we can't make it stop. But what I can do is help you leave your body so you don't have to feel the pain of this.
Oh, it's beautiful, but it's also very sad.
Yeah. Well, it's sad that living beings have to experience excruciating.
Yeah. Right.
And at the same time, when I learn the neuroscience behind that, and I like to think I kind of like put words to, if our nervous system could talk, I feel like I'm advocating for it. But when I think about our nervous system doing that, and we're mammals, every mammal has a system that does this. I think how loving that is. When humans have let us down, our nervous system never let us down. It never stops working. It will never stop fighting for us and protecting us. And so I found as a child, because of my trauma history, I couldn't get away from what was happening and I couldn't make it stop. So my nervous system came in and said, we can help you to not have to feel this or even be in your body and be present to it. And if I didn't find that, I for sure wouldn't be alive. I mean, I was still very suicidal in my early 20s, but I absolutely wouldn't be here. It is. So
are you talking about like dissociating? Are you talking about kind of self-protection through dissociating?
Yeah, and there's many levels of our dorsal vagal complex. Like, starts with apathy. I don't really care, whatever. I feel kind of in a funk, disconnected, fuzzy, hopeless. I don't have any energy. Everything seems so hard. Now I feel depressed. Now I start to feel like I'm not fully here, not in my body. There's levels of dissociation, which is, again, an experience of not being in our bodies. I was highly dissociated, meaning I didn't remember most of my childhood at all.
Yeah.
And then in my 20s, I would look in the mirror and I wouldn't recognize who it was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if the world was real, if I was real. I would show up. I remember showing up to a therapist who wasn't a drama therapist. It's so funny when I think of this. It wasn't funny at all in the moment. But I showed up to this therapist's office and he didn't do trauma work. It shouldn't have taken me on as a client. But I got to sit down and he's like, how'd you get here today? And I said, I don't know. And he was scared. I could see in his face.
Of course.
He was really scared. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know? And I said, I don't know. I just remember being in your waiting room, but I don't know how I got here. And that's just deep dissociation.
Right.
That I was experiencing. So dissociation has levels. You know, for example, most of us, for anyone listening here, you ever drive to your house or walk to your house in your neighborhood? So like you're close by and you get home. And if I asked you, how many stop signs did you go through? Or like, you're like, I don't know. I was thinking about the other thing. That's a mild dissociation. And
and also your subconscious is kind of driving. You could be thinking about groceries, and you're automatically driving because of your subconscious taking you, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a lot of that was, painted the picture of my childhood experience.
Wait, can I ask you a question? So in your 20s, were you? So I worked in nonprofit for 5 years in addiction.
Yeah.
And the girls, 3 out of 5, heavy trauma, sexual abuse and all that. And they tend to go one way or the other. So in your 20s, did you then become kind of crazy and wild and or did you, go the other way, which is, depression, seclusion?
Mm-hmm. Well, so in high school, and I just think it's so amazing how our systems find a way to make it through things that are unbearable, unspeakable. And for anyone listening, I don't want you to think like, well, I didn't have that kind of history, so is my experience still unbearable? Of course, because it's all very relative. But what I found, what I learned, which I was totally subconscious, is if I just am not in this house, I'll be a little bit safer. So what I learned to do, and learned as a young kid in elementary school, like I had to teach myself to read. There was no one helping me. It was just me on my own doing everything. But I learned if I can do the very best I can possibly do, I can get love from these teachers. And I can also be in this house less. So the interesting thing is I used 2 parts of my nervous system, one that shut down state when I was home, and then this hypermobilizing state called our sympathetic nervous system of do. So
you mean achievement, good grades, that kind of stuff.
Achievement, that's right. I joined every club you could possibly join. I was the president of everything, all of which because then I wasn't home till 9 p.m. every day. And I was safe at school. So that followed me into college. But then once I got to college, I went to college in Boston. And oftentimes when you leave unsafe environments, then your psyche says, oh, it might be safe for us to begin processing this. And so what happened to me was, it's a culmination, but I had to take private loans out for college because again, I grew up in poverty, and my stepfather, who was the one that abused me, forged my signatures. He was my co-signer, and he forged my signatures on all these loans. And took the money. And, I had no one to help me. There was nobody like I could call to say, hey, could you help me? And that was when, things began to arise for me more fully. Things began to show up more. I mean, I had to work full time while in college to try to be able to stay. And then I started to feel what I go into pretty deep depressions. I mean, I gained 75 pounds in 2 months, maybe.
Wow.
I was.
Did you have friends, or were you kind of introverted and alone?
Did, but I had a lot of trauma bonded friends. People who were also very were around, but weren't in health themselves. So But there was just no one. There was no one to call, it was really hard. And I did turn to, so in college and in high school, I was disconnected from the abuse that happened. I did always have a sense that I was abused. And I would say that to my mother and my stepfather. So fascinating, right? I was so dissociated. I didn't know it was him. So I would say to them, I think I was abused. And they would say, oh, everyone feels that way. Just don't tell anyone that. It's very common. It's not, of course, that's not true. But whatever kids hear, whatever you're told as a child, you just think that must be what everyone else experiences. So anyway, I experienced a lot of depression in college. and suicidal ideation, and then but was promiscuous. The thing is, the way that I experienced my sexuality was I had to not be present for it. So, drinking a lot in order to experience it. Numbing, risky behaviors. That happened for sure in my 20s.
Can I ask you something? Because this is also very, very common as well. What were you I mean, not just you, but anyone who has followed this pattern, what do they get out of the sexual exploration, promiscuity? Is it the attention and validation, or is it dopamine? What is it? Why do people tend to go that way if they have been sexually abused?
It's, two primary reasons. Number one, if someone has experienced, especially if you were abused by people who are supposed to love you, what occurs is now our system says, this is what love is, and this is my value. This is the way that I'm loved. So instead of actually being embodied in someone's sexual experience, it's a way to achieve love in connection. Even
there's an exchange.
Yeah, exactly. But it is certainly not for my own pleasure or experience.
Right. You're saying that I will give you me in exchange. Yes. I will feel loved. I will feel, attractive, valuable, and all that. Right. Yeah, and then, then you want more and more of that. Right. Yes.
That's a part of it. The second thing is, the interesting thing about our systems is when we experience trauma, the beautiful thing about them, they're always trying to complete the experience. And by complete the experience, that means make it different. Make it different. In this experience, maybe I get to have power instead of being powerless. In this
interesting. Right.
I can be the one that's in control instead of being controlled. So
there's a part of you that's trying to rewrite this experience.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's another reason that it that transpires. The interesting thing is, though, that the way that threat detector I mentioned works, neuroception, it's located in our brainstem. It's always looking into the world. What does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? To decide if we're safe at any given moment. And it has kind of like a database of information. That's all your life experiences that it looks to decide if your current situation is safe, dangerous, or life-threatening. So the interesting thing is, remember, I was abused inside of my home. So what my system in my database says is, if someone gets close to you like family, that's very dangerous. Now, my nervous system said, this receptacle said, strangers, I wasn't abused by strangers. Strangers are nice. Strangers aren't bad. Strangers are safe.
Interesting.
So in my dating world, when I would date someone and I didn't really know them well, I felt much safer to be definitely wasn't fully embodied, but more embodied, etc. Now, if I started to date someone, it's been 6 months, it's been a year. Now we're talking about moving in together, whatever. What occurred was my threat detector said, whoa, you're living with this person? Holy shit. They
start to feel like family.
They start to feel like family.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what would occur, this really kind, wonderful person, let's say, what would transpire is, all of a sudden, my system would say, absolutely not. You are not getting anywhere near her. And I was completely disconnected from my sexuality. I had zero desire for sexual intimacy or experience at all whatsoever. And I wouldn't let that person close to me. And I couldn't understand because no one was telling me why it was happening. I couldn't understand this pattern. I didn't know how to change it. I saw lots of therapists who didn't explain that to me and why it was happening. And it was so incredibly confusing to not understand what was going on inside of me.
I want to put a period here and I want to take a beat because you just shed light on something that I've never heard in this way before. Now, as a therapist and someone who's worked, from eating disorders to addiction, of course, the pattern is there. And I know this pattern, but what you just said about abuse at home and then finding safety in strangers because home wasn't safe And then if you actually decide to start building a relationship, now that smells like home. So now it's unsafe. I've never heard that. And so I think also people listening, there may be many aha, connect the dot type of moments right now as you're saying this.
I deeply hope there are. Something I say all the time to people, and really I started by saying this to this young part of me, is you make sense. You make sense. Everything about us makes sense. Every single thing about us. And for most of us, we felt like we haven't made sense. We're like, what the hell is happening? I don't get this. Why is this pattern occurring? And when it comes to, something called polyvagal theory and the latest neuroscience research, and by latest, I mean like 20 years ago, it shows us this, which is so fascinating and so, I think, cool that our systems are able to do whatever it takes to keep us safe from what they think is going to be dangerous, even if it's not. They think it has enough flavoring, like you said, home. There's enough flavoring there of similarity where our system says, no, not safe. The same goes for, just another example, like let's say someone's listening who wants to step towards your purpose. Your purpose requires being seen in the world. And your receptacle of information says being seen means you're going to be humiliated, harmed, hurt. Well, guess what happens? Our protective system says, we're not stepping into the world. It's not safe for you to step in that purpose, because look what happens when you're seen. And our nervous system stops us. So,
So how did you, once you had that revelation and you realized that you're not able to swim past the breakers of a relationship because it goes from feeling safe to unsafe, what was the execution piece from there? What was your own prescription when you realized that about self?
Well, so to give a bit more information, I got off the plane in Los Angeles with 2 suitcases and nowhere to sleep, like no adult wow. $100,000 in debt because the money that was stolen from me.
Yeah.
I had nowhere to go. And
how old were you?
20, just about to be 22.
Oh my gosh, babe. And also why Los Angeles? Why'd you leave Boston?
I went to school for theater. It was my first degree.
Okay.
In Boston, a school called Emerson, and they have
I know Emerson.
Semester. Yeah, you could do your last semester in LA. So I did that, and I liked it. And I always had this knowingness, like my intuition was telling me, like I'm going to live there, and I had no home, So it was when I think of that though, like. To get off a plane and nowhere to sleep. I slept on a friend's floor with cockroaches in their kitchen for like a few months. And then I I shared a twin air mattress for a full year with a friend, which is a weird thing to share, a twin air mattress. But,
where in Los Angeles? Because I grew up here and I'm always, again, by the way, this story, very common, right? People coming to LA. LA feels very shiny. It's very exciting. Of course, the beach, the mountains, all of that. Where in Los Angeles did you start? What city?
I lived in West Hollywood. The friend's place that I was living
in
in West Hollywood. I went.
Well, at least the area is nice. Yeah.
The area was nice. I gotta tell you, the place we were staying was not so nice. Then, 3 friends, we shared a place at Park La Brea, but I shared a room with another person with 1 air mattress, and we didn't have like even a bureau to put clothes in. We just put it on the ground. It was really
like sardines. Yeah.
And I met someone who was the absolute best choice. Really, it's remarkable I was able to choose the person I did at that point in my life based on where I came from. But I met someone whom really fit into my dynamic, but in a healthier way, meaning he had all the needs and didn't have the ability to empathize, and there was no room for me really. And I was really good at being someone who had no needs and centered someone else and took care of them in all ways. And was only allowed to have certain versions of myself, but I couldn't be angry. That wasn't okay. All of this is very familiar to my childhood. So what happened, the same way that threat detector works, my system said, it's familiar. This is what love is.
Right. It smells familiar.
Yeah. And so he was not when I say better, such a better choice. He was nothing like my mother or my stepfather in terms of being dangerous or unkind, but he had a lot of flavorings of them. So I got married to him when I was 25. I was married for a long time. And in that relationship, at first, it really worked. Like the first year and a half, I thought I was like if you ask me, I was so in love.
Yeah, of course.
Really, there was a trauma bond happening there, and it was creating safety for me. My system was so unsafe in the world. And then what happened around a year and a half?
Can you explain to anyone who doesn't know what a trauma bond is? I know this is a very topical thing these days. Yeah. What exactly is a trauma bond?
So essentially what that means is, or the way that I think about how we come into relationship, I think about we each have this play, like a script. Think of it like a theatrical play. And I got my play from my childhood. And the play, let's say it's like Midsummer Night's Dream, was my family play. And everyone, you're born and you get a role. You don't choose your role, you're just given the role. So you get a play and you get the Midsummer Night's Dream play, and someone gets the role of the scapegoat. Here you go. Everything's going to be your fault. Here you go. You're the one that's going to get abused in the family system. Here, you're the one that has to get everything right. And if you get everything right, you receive love that way. You're going to take care of the adults. Okay, everybody, now that you have your role, you have to say your lines. And if everyone says their lines in the right order, the play works. So, and it might be a dysfunctional play, but it works. And what occurs is then I grow up and I've got my role, and I was like coming to Los Angeles with my play subconsciously. And my role in the play was, I am the person who has no needs. I am the person who takes care of others. And I'm the person who, is abused and takes everything on. So those are some like basics of my character role. And so as I have this play and I'm looking out into the world with my role, I also have a role that needs to be filled, meaning someone I'm looking for that can balance out the role that I play. So I'm looking for, in essence, like some parts of my mother, let's say. So I have no needs. So I'm looking for someone who has all the needs. I'm also looking for someone who can't see me fully, can't empathize with me, and so on and so forth. And so my partner, he had his own play that he came from, and he had his own role in that play. And part of his role was, you have to be, you receive love if you're centered all the time, and it's all about you, and your experience is the only experience. And so what is he looking for? He's not looking for somebody else who's going to do that same exact thing, because those two roles won't go together. He's looking for somebody who is the yin to his yang, right? And so am I. I'm not looking for someone who's also invisible, because then I'm going to have to be seen. So we both have these roles that comes from trauma, really. And what we are looking for is someone to fill the other role that's familiar to us. And so you meet someone, this is the thing, the classic thing people say, they just meet someone and it's been a week and they're like, I feel like I've known you my whole life. How did I ever do life without you? It's been 1 month, right? Like, I feel like I know you so well. What we're really saying is, oh my gosh, you remind me so much of my caregivers. This is just like my childhood. I'm back in it again. Even if it's, still really exciting and wonderful, that's what's occurring. And so if we've had traumatic experience, like I just described with mine, a trauma bond is, I'm looking for someone else to fit into that dynamic, that relational dynamic that was traumatizing and not supportive for me, but it's what I know. And we
you're
this
tracing the old.
Time. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And most folks in relationships are unknowingly doing that kind of thing, because if we haven't dealt with our own attachment and our and what I call internal co-regulation, so really giving ourselves a new childhood experience and repairing all of that, what's going to happen is we're going to choose what's familiar and what we know. And that's exactly what I did in my marriage.
That is such a thorough definition and description of trauma bond. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. So after a little while, like I mentioned earlier, so after he and I were living together, specifically after we got married, my system was like, this is really bad. This is really bad. This is just like your childhood. And I was like totally shut down. Sexually, I wanted like no emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, anything.
Wait, is that also you realizing, wait a minute, in the beginning, yes, it was hot and heavy and exciting, and now I'm realizing this is bad. Is that also part of you evolving and growing, kind of growing out of what you're used to?
Not yet. That happened later. This was just my pattern of they're close now. This reminds me of my childhood. And then we were in couples therapy for like 9 years, so long.
Wow.
And what occurred was he created enough safety for me and was supportive of it, that I could finally find the healing support I needed and devoted my life to it in so many ways. So I really ventured down my own healing journey. And what occurred was, I don't know how many years in, but I started to have needs. I started to take up space. I started to not just be easygoing and okay with everything. Like, she's so easygoing. Like we never went to literally a restaurant that I liked for the whole, for years and years and years, because I was just so used to that dynamic. And then it's so exciting when this happens. Then I wasn't. And then that lioness within me that was not safe to come out in my childhood was now safe to come out. And this is that's like saying to someone else, hey, to my partner, like, I've been healing and I wrote a new play. In fact, I hate that shitty play that I came from. I don't like my role in the play. I just wrote myself a new role. No longer do I not have needs. See, look, there's just a bunch of needs here now. I need to take up space now. I actually have an opinion on things. And you know what? There's some things you do that I'm not okay with. I want to have a talk about that too. And so on and so forth. And I was like, here's my new role. Are you excited? I'm so excited. And what usually transpires, at least at first, is the other person is like, what the hell? What
of course.
No, this isn't how we do this. This
isn't what I signed up for. This is false advertising. This is confusing. Exactly. And basically, who are you?
Exactly. Who are you? I don't like this. And his experience was, I don't like this version of you. And it was, we spent a lot of time in this battle.
Sure.
Until I'm really stubborn, until I realized or got to a place of, it's not possible inside this dynamic for me to be fully me, and for both of us to grow together, because both people really have to be doing the work in order for it to be long lasting and sustainable. And so,
now you're what, are you in your 30s now? How old are you now?
I'm 36.
I mean, not today, but in this when you had this revelation, you realized it's not going to work. You're 36.
That's a great question. I don't know. Maybe 30.
Late 20s.
Late 20s, I would say.
Okay, got it.
Late 20s. Late 20s, and then I was in the battle phase for a while.
Yeah.
Meaning like, I need to take up, why can't, I remember when I would be like gaslit out of things, I was like, or when I was angry and I was like, my reality is real. I remember saying that once, and I was angry, and it felt so good to be able to finally say that out loud, and so for me, with that relationship ending, it was such a beautiful celebration of my journey. And he and I are, still, he feels like family to me. I feel deeply grateful that I was able to find someone whom was safe and whom was supportive of my own journey. And at the same time, it was such an important thing for that to come to an end. And I just want to name that, because our culture, there's still this thing out there, that's a failure if a relationship ends.
Sure.
And in fact, oftentimes it can be an incredible marker of our healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thing for that to happen.
Can we pause there for a second? Because now you're hitting something else that I think is so important. Speaking of, and of course, you don't have to be single to get stuff from these podcasts. But if you are, yes, when a relationship has expired, or you have finally found a voice, or you're able to stand on your truth, you're able to tell yourself that you matter, or you have needs, or whatever. It's also like lined with, well, if this relationship doesn't work out, there's failure, especially if you're married. Because I'm also divorced. And I remember, now there's a salvage stamped on my head, and, it's supposed to be divorced. And I thought it was happily ever after, and what's wrong with me and all of that. But you're saying that this is the act break in your life where you actually, the bib turned into a cape. I always talk about how in my journey, I was, adult child of an alcoholic, and kind of had a bib, right? And also youngest sibling position. At 35, I didn't even know how to work the dishwasher. But it was this moment for me too, where, and I found myself through motorcycles, CrossFit, and donuts. And that's when I turned my bib into a cape. It's when, after becoming a therapist, saying, you know what? I don't want to wear Dockers and a tie. I want to actually help people at the park. I want to make house calls. And I was on Tumblr at the time, but that's how this whole Angry Therapist started. Was I want to have a practice that is honest to me, and it felt very empowered. So it seems like this is that moment in your life where it became an act break. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling, oh, I can relate or resonate, or I think I'm around there, know that it's a really empowering, but also terrifying place to be.
Yeah.
But exciting.
And I also will say this, I do a lot of somatic attachment work and somatic parts work, or people who may, you can think of more like inner child work, parts work, same thing to me. But more often than not, so the reason I couldn't leave that relationship for so long, even though I had lots of people saying to me, and listeners probably have had this experience happen too, I'm sure some of you listening, where you have loved ones and friends who are like, you deserve so much better. Why don't you just leave? Like, this person doesn't deserve you. And why? And there can be so much shame around, but I can't leave. And I want to explain just really quickly why we struggle to leave. And one of the primary reasons is because inside of our romantic partnerships is where our younger parts show up the most. And that's because the way this threat detector works that I mentioned, right? It's always looking to see, what does this remind me of? So a romantic partnership is going to be most reminiscent of our earliest childhood experiences. The earliest childhood experiences are the people who are supposed to love us the most. They were our person, whether they were there for you or not, and so on and so forth. So when we get into relationships, our young
Wait, I'm writing this down, by the way. Real quick, I have to write this down. The earliest... our romantic relationships draw out our earliest parts. Say that again, the way you said it.
If there's could be one area where our young parts show up the most, is our romantic partnerships. And the reason why the young parts show up the most in our romantic partnerships, there's a specific reason. And that is because it begins with that threat detector again. It all really goes back to our nervous system. But we have this threat detector, and it's always saying, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? And it has a database of information to look to. So when we think of romantic partnerships, there are a lot of flavorings that are reminiscent of connection in our earliest childhood experience. Meaning, the people in our earliest childhood experience, they were supposed to be our most important people, the center of our universe, the people who are supposed to love us the most, our primary person, whatever. If you think of romantic partnerships, in many ways, that's what those people are or are supposed to be. And so what occurs is our threat detector is like, whoa, this is a lot like childhood. What do we have on that? And it quickly says, Sarah, how did you have to behave in childhood in order to be loved, in order to be safe, in order to belong? That is the MO. That's the game plan. It worked because you're here and alive. So that's what we're going to do in this romantic partnership. And so what occurs is, and I'm sure listeners, some of you could relate to this. You're single and you're like, I've got this. I feel capable and able in life and feel really good, maybe for most of the time. Then all of a sudden you get into a romantic partnership and you're like, what the fuck happened? I'm out of control. I can't understand what's occurring. I feel unsafe. I feel incapable. I feel scared. What's happening? Well, what's happening is a young part of you is embodying your system. And it's almost like the more I do trauma work, the more clear it is to me that time's not linear. We travel time all the time. Like we travel back to time when we're triggered or activated. Sure. We can travel to the future too. So anyway, a young part is present in our bodies. And so think of this. Let's say like whatever's happening in my romantic partnership, let's say it's triggering an 8-year-old part of me. That would be like my adult friends saying to me, Sarah, you're so amazing and all of these beautiful things. And why don't you just leave? You deserve better. Well, I'm 8 years old. I'm 8 years old. Where do you want me to go? I'm 8. I won't be safe in the world. I'm 8. I can't be alone. Mm-hmm. It's better to be with this person and at least have connection and some semblance of safety than be 8 years old and unsafe and all alone. And so one of the primary reasons that people struggle to leave is because of that, because these young parts of us are inhabiting our experience and running the show. And, if we look at kids who are abused and taken out of a home and put into foster care, they want to go back to that home more often than not, because that's what they know. And so when I say it was a celebration, it's because when I could get to a place where I finally had given the young parts of me the safety they had been looking for their entire lives, that I became the parent to these young parts, I was giving them their needs, that now it was safe to leave because I was taking care of the 8-year-old adult Sarah. And as a result of that, what occurred when, in creating an internal secure attachment, meaning really we can imprint new childhood experiences where my system was no longer relating to myself or others in the way that I was in the past. And so I remember when I left, it was so beautiful to be able to just love being with me, to not need anyone else, to feel like, wow, this is so amazing, to finally feel home. I was looking for the home my whole life.
Yeah, this is where the cape comes in. This is when you realize that it's not about trusting other people. It's about me trusting myself.
That's right. Yeah.
In the beginning of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that what we want to look for, if we're finding ourselves single and feeling like that survival feeling of needing someone, like I'm not going to be okay if I don't have this person, or I'm not going to be complete if I don't have a person, or I'm not, things aren't going to be all right. I'm not going to be lovable if I don't have a person. We just want to get curious about that, and not being, reprimanding or unkind to ourselves, but be curious, because what that is cluing into is there is a part of us that is, I think of this like a young part is reaching up, like somebody pick me up, pick me up so that I can feel safe. And the only person that can actually pick that part up in a way that creates lasting change is us. And when we pick that part up, everything changes. And so otherwise what occurs is we're perpetually looking for someone else, dating, like another person, just save me from this experience, or pick me up so that I'm okay. And even if they do pick us up, it's never enough, because that young part is looking for us all along. They've been looking for us.
Yeah. Wow. So that seems like that connection to yourself, you realizing that you are your own safe tree.
Yeah.
That seemed like the beginning for you, right? From then on, now on to your self-betterment journey, your hero's journey, I'm sure, digesting books and courses and just really getting thirsty about all of that.
Yeah. And I was doing that work inside of my marriage, which is the only way that I could eventually leave, marriage is because, or rather I started with talk therapy, which had a lot of value, and it wasn't enough. I think it's so interesting. I think about this all the time, that the medical field has many specialists, right? Like I have an optometrist, cardiologist. I mean, I don't have those things, a cardiologist, but if I needed one, I could go to one. I have a gastroenterologist and so on and so forth. You see a specialist based on what you need. Now, the overarching, I think the world of mental health is archaic in this way, that if you go into psychology today, you can usually find the predominant thing folks are going to find is psychodynamic or talk therapy, which is great and wonderful. It's like a great cardiologist. The issue, though, is that
it's one crayon.
That's right. It's not the only treatment that's necessary for healing.
Right.
But because the world of healing the world doesn't know about it enough, and this is the fault of a system, is that someone like me, before I started my healing journey, I just thought, well, this must be the thing that helps everything. And I had a lot of talk therapists who really should have said to me, this is outside my expertise. You need to go to an ophthalmologist. Right, so what would occur is I would go to like the best cardiologist and I would get great heart surgery. And I would leave and say, but my eyes are still messed up. And they would say, oh, I don't know why. The heart surgery went great. So everything went really awesome. And so I left just feeling like, well, I just must be messed up because this isn't working. I can't tell you how many people would try to help me rationalize why I should not feel shame. And there was no amount of talking about me not feeling shame that actually made me not feel shame. Or talking about why I'm safe to not feel dissociated that actually stopped me from feeling dissociated. And this is because the things I'm talking about are subcortical, meaning they live in our bodies. They don't live up in our cortical brain. And so there's so much benefit to doing cortical work or talk therapy. And something else is necessary, and that is somatic work. Somatic work is how we speak the language of what is happening below the brain. Yeah. That is not a verbal language. And for everyone listening, just to simplify this, if you've ever felt anxious and you've tried to tell yourself, you're like cusping on, am I going to have a panic attack? Feel anxious. And you tell yourself, like, just calm down. There's nothing to be anxious about. You're about to do this interview. You're about to do this thing. Like, chill out. You're totally fine. If you try to do that, you probably notice that at the very least, your anxiety doesn't get any better. And at the worst, it just increases. And that's because you're trying to speak a verbal language to a system that can't hear a verbal language. So it's literally, it doesn't know that you're talking to it. And so on my journey, I was really lucky, and I don't even remember exactly how I found somatic trauma healing. And that changed my whole life. It changed everything. It is the only reason I'm here, for sure. So you went from head to body, right? So talk therapy can be very heady. You're saying somatic and dropping into your body, rewiring yourself, all that kind of work, instead of just talking about your feelings. That's right. So, and I give that analogy of like the medical system versus what's happening in mental health, because it leaves people feeling shitty, like there's something wrong with them, when in fact, we just need different courses of action based on what we're experiencing. We need to see different specialists. And when that occurs, our system responds. And it doesn't take 10 years for that to transpire. And so I found somatic work. It allowed me to free myself of the past. It allowed me to regulate my nervous system as someone who was, I had so much chronic illness. I was bedridden, so depressed, suicidal, just not how you see me now. And I think that's important because I know when I was on my journey, I would hear people talk and like, oh man, but I'll never get there. Like I'm so, it's not possible for me. And so I just want listeners to know that if you're feeling dysregulated, anxious, frustrated, shut down, burnt out, you can't slow down, apathetic, hopeless, frozen, etc., all those things that are stuck in the past, that what I'm telling you, there is nothing special about my nervous system. It's so ordinary. It's just really run of the mill. And if that's possible for me, it's possible for each of us. On the ACEs study, adverse childhood experiences of trauma, I score so high. On that ACEs study, I should not be here for all intents and purposes. Yeah. And the reason I'm so passionate about this work is because I believe these studies are faulty. The reason I'm saying that is because I deeply believe when our systems get what they need to come into healing, they respond. And our systems know how to come back into homeostasis. They know how to come into healing. They're incredibly intelligent. They just need to be spoken to in a way they understand. And so, it's just a really important message that I want to make sure listeners know, that there's hope, and it's possible. And science says that too.
Thank you for that. And when you were saying, there is no one doctor that is a fits all blanket, right? There's these specialists. And this is why when I said to myself, okay, I want to really give singlehood a cape. I want to help people who are going through this journey, which the world has labeled as incomplete. You're not happy until you find the one, all that stuff. And of course, you throw in the ticking clock and all that. And then you layer it with toxic swipe culture and dick pics and catfishing and all the stuff that's happening.
Totally.
I said to myself, I need the Avengers. I don't want to be the only one talking, because I'm only one person with one story through one lens. And so that's why I have Sarah Baldwin, and I have another person who does the episodes on top of a mountain and during ice baths, and and it's the collective, right? And so hopefully that's my way of saying that it's not a one fits all whatever you're going through. And so thank you for
appreciate that about what you're doing, John, because it's so important. And not only are there different modalities so important, but there'll be certain people that are more resonant for each of us too, you know, and that's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. And you creating this collective and allowing this audience to be able to have those different flavorings is really such a gift. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. Yeah,
thank you for your stuff is I think it's going to land so well with people. So it's going to give them a lot of revelations. It's gold. Where can we find you? What are you up to now, right? What are some of your goals in your practice? So first, where can we find you? On social media?
At sarahbaldwincoaching.com or on Instagram. I give lots of free stuff away and lots of free teachings. My handle is Sarah with an HB coaching. I also have some free resources for folks. So if you're just beginning and you're like, what is the nervous system and what does this even mean? And I have anxiety, but I'm not sure. Like, what does that all mean? I have a free quiz, and I created this quiz, and you can check out my Instagram and take it. I created it because, as I mentioned, I believe this should be in every school. Like, we should be able to understand our system. So when you take this quiz, there's different parts of our nervous system, and it's going to clue you into it's called a state, which state you hang out in the most, which one's most familiar to you. And there's specific things we do to regulate our nervous system based on the state we are in. So that's completely free. There's a free workbook on trauma and your nervous system there as well. And then I have courses and programs that are offered throughout the year. The next one will be happening because one just started. The next one will happen in January, called Navigating Your Nervous System.
Nice.
And I'm writing a book for everybody at the moment.
Oh, you're writing a book. What is the book called? Yeah. Do you have a title yet?
A working title is You Make Sense. We'll see what happens. But it's really a holistic understanding of this vehicle we inhabit and how to be in charge of it so that we can change our lives. And I'm hoping to get it also made into a young adult or a book for teens too. So
nice. Yeah.
It can be in schools and stuff. So yeah.
I love it. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and thank you for being a part of this team. I'm super excited to see all the other audio podcasts that you're going to be contributing to this collective. And and also thank you for being so transparent and honest with your story. You shared a lot of personal things, and I don't want to minimize how hard that is for one to share one story.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. For all the listeners here, I'm so excited to bring this work to you and spend some time with you. And, trauma feeds on silence and shame feeds on silence. So it is such an honor for me to be able to share part of my story with everyone here. And if any part of it, inclination was resonant for you, just a reminder that you're not alone and that things can change.
Thank you for that. And finally, early on in the conversation, you said something, I copied it, and I'm now going to paste it as the title with your approval. And so you said, if your nervous system could talk. And I remember thinking, okay, that's the title for this episode.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know what's cool? You're talking, you don't realize the things you say. I love that. If your nervous system could talk, that's great.
You know, I see words because I'm also a writer, and when people, and I'm like this in session, when people are talking, I try to get out of my own way, and something will light up. Words will light up in neon, like a visual. I will just see it, and then I will know that means something, and I'll use it in the session or put it in my back pocket. And so that's that's what happened here.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing a bit of your process too. I'm going to take that with me, and thank you for your time.
Yeah. All right. Everyone listening, be well.